Looks like we've got a good crowd now, so let's go ahead and get started, and then we can have more people fill in as they're able.
Sounds
But
good.
really appreciate everybody joining today, especially Ryan and Nicole. They've offered to share their experience with us. Ryan's often one of the key go-to people for this society in regards to exercise, but today they're here to speak to us about their relationship and how FSH has affected that. So again, really appreciate the two of you joining today. If you'd like to start with a little bit of background on yourselves.
Kristen's skin just crawled a little bit. I don't know if you saw. No, because did you see his jacket? The that guy there. Can
We're gonna do it this way.
you see that, Kristen? Are we like? How does Zoom work? This is kind of new to me. Does everybody see the same thing that I'm seeing?
If you have the
Nice.
screen split and you can
No,
see
I mean like
everyone.
for example, it flashes between different people. Like right now, I'm seeing Rondell.
Oh, if you swipe it,
No.
you can see multiple boxes of people.
Oh,
Yeah. Do gallery mode.
gallery.
Yeah.
Gallery mode.
How the fuck? I'm on a computer, like a desktop.
Where's gallery?
There should be on the right-hand corner a little arrow. Maybe. How do you do that?
That doesn't matter.
They know on a Mac?
I just thought it was funny. One guy had a Trump jacket on, and Kristen's like hardcore damn. That's all. It's just funny.
What?
No, that was it. Nothing big deal. But
Oh gosh.
for background,
Oh, so okay. Sorry.
Nicole,
What?
you want to share some background?
No, you start.
Okay. Well, I'm Ryan Levinson, and this is my wife Nicole. I'm the guy who's got FSH. Nicole and I have been together.
And real quick while Ryan's starting, everybody that's not speaking, it might be good if we mute our mics just so there's not an echo.
Echo. We're good? Okay.
Yeah.
I'm gonna quiz Nicole a little bit. How long ago did we first meet?
That's because he doesn't remember.
I don't remember. How long ago did we first meet?
We first met in class 29 years ago
In college,
in college.
when she was 19.
I was 20.
We still pretend she's 19 sometimes.
You like to pretend that, yes.
So then that's when we met, and then we were just kind of fuck buddies for a while. And then when did we actually start getting serious? When did we move in together?
Maybe 6 years into the relationship.
Okay. And then we lived together and we were committed for how long until we got married?
Probably another 5 years.
Okay. And then total time, how long have we been married?
Gosh, right? 16 years.
We've been married for 16 years. So our total time together has been 38 years. And we dated before that for
38 years, huh?
I don't fucking know, dude. But we've been together for a minute. So that's our relationship background.
Yeah.
And in terms of kind of life stuff, early on we were in college together, and sort of both of us were students. And then after that, she was a school teacher and I was working as an I don't know what you would call my job. I was an athlete for a while, and then I taught water sports for a while, and then
Kiteboarding school.
yeah, I had a business for a little while, kiteboarding. I just had a couple of different things, and I worked with the fire department for a little while on the medical side. And then we both left our careers and got a boat and sailed to French Polynesia. So we sailed across the Pacific from San Diego, and then spent the next 10 years, almost exactly 10 years, living together 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, in a space that was, less than 50 feet long by 25 feet wide. Under tough situations, like oftentimes sleep deprived, someone always has to be awake. So you're trying to go from one place to another that takes 2 or 3 or even 21 days at one point. You're only sleeping 2 hours at a time, and then you're awake for 2 hours and you're sleeping for 2 hours. And you still have to make all the meals and fix the things that break and check the navigation and make sure the weather's okay and run the boat. So, that's a stressful situation on anybody, but on a marriage, and then times 10 years, and you're in a place where it's always, it's tropical, subtropical, even in the summertime, and sometimes hard to get supplies. And anyways, all of that. And maybe, I guess, it's similar to what some of you might have experienced during COVID when you were in your house and you couldn't leave it or something. I don't know. I just thought of that right now. But that's sort of the background of our relationship. And now we've just recently moved back to the United States. Her father had a really bad stroke, and her mom has dementia. And at the same time, my condition, the disease had progressed to the point where it was physically challenging, to the point where running the boat was all encompassing, and I wanted to start exploring some other stuff. And in order to do that, I had to throttle back a little bit on boat maintenance and crouching and standing over and over and over again all day long, and the sleep deprivation and the difficult to eat, and all that kind of stuff, which impacts all of us. So that's where we are now. We're back here in San Diego, and glad to be on the show and happy to answer any questions or dive into any topics.
That history, were you diagnosed?
I was diagnosed in my mid-20s,
He
in
was
the
20
mid-90s.
Yeah, he was 23 and 19.
Tell who does the dates in the relationship?
19, I think it was 1990, early 1996.
Yeah.
So you two were already together for, sounds like 2 or 3 years at that point, or
Define
at least a
together.
little while.
No, we actually,
it
we
was
were
before.
just, he got diagnosed maybe, we were hanging out for maybe 5 months, 4 months before that, when he got diagnosed.
Normally on Friday night late, we were hanging out. I mean, we weren't like in a serious relationship
Right.
at any point prior to that.
Yeah.
Did that initial diagnosis have an effect on the relationship, given it wasn't as solidified at that point?
Did the initial diagnosis have an effect on the relationship?
No, because we didn't really know too much about what it meant. And Ryan was still, he had some, obviously he went in to get checked because he noticed there was, something wasn't quite right, but you couldn't really see a lot of it.
Well, it
You were
it
still
didn't
doing
impact,
stuff.
it
Yeah,
didn't impact our relationship, but it impacted my relationship with other women at the time. That wasn't really like, it was purely sexual. I'm not talking like any kind of emotional committed thing, but I remember very clearly the first time that I was, getting intimate with a woman and it was purely physical. It had nothing to do with like I'm charming or whatever. In fact, Nicole one time, more recently, I made a comment that like, young women weren't flirting with me anymore, and like what happened? Did I lose my game, And Nicole's like, you never had any game. She goes, you were just hot, So she's like, you would have done so much better if you weren't such an asshole. And I was like, oh, okay,
No,
thanks, babe.
dork.
Dork. Yeah, I thought much better. But anyways, I remember it was a woman, a friend of a friend, and we were starting to hook up, and I took my shirt off, and she looked at me and looked confused when she noticed some of the symptoms of FSH, notably for me, the pecs and the shoulders a little bit. And it was like a switch was flicked. Like, I mean, I saw her looking and I saw her face get confused. She was very expressive. And then it was kind of like very quickly she ended the situation and like left, and that was the last I ever heard of her. So that was like, for me, the first time I was like, okay, this is going to have an impact on me, romantically to some degree, potentially depending on who I'm with. But it just it never even crossed Nicole's radar, I don't think.
No. Didn't really. It still doesn't.
Which is weird. I tell her all the time, I'm like, okay, but yeah, I would say that in terms of how it impacted our relationship, once we did start getting more serious, it was much more of an issue of me not wanting to be a future burden on her. Maybe she didn't realize what was coming down the line or something like that. That was the kind of stuff that was more of an issue rather than where we were at that moment and her looking down the line in our future and saying, now I realize many years later, Nicole's just kind of a natural caregiver. It's almost like if I didn't have FSH would be a problem. Like, if she always has to have something to kind of like right now it's her parents or, whatever. And I'm a big 12-year-old. So she's always like kind of taking care of me anyways, and the stuff that we do together predominantly, we're very active. So we're doing a lot of like scuba diving and kiteboarding and sailing, across an ocean or
And surfing and
surfing.
swimming.
And when we're not doing that, we're often training for it. So there's a period of time where we're running, she's an EMT and a lifeguard, so we're running medical scenarios together all the time or whatever. So, in those circumstances, you're always adapting to the other person and you're working together anyways. So it's not so much like one person's able-bodied and one person's disabled and you have to move forward. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that was helpful. Also, just to clarify, everybody else, feel free to jump in with questions that you have them.
Just
one
curious,
more-
do you want to go next?
Go ahead. Go ahead, Rakesh.
So just curious, how do you keep up with, I guess, with Nicole in your case, or, anybody you're training with, physically, who don't have FSH, how do you cope up with that?
Do you mean like from a performance standpoint?
Yeah, well, I mean, say you're doing scuba diving, right? And you're with a group and, maybe we tire out faster or are not able to keep up or something. Do you encounter this kind of scenarios?
Yeah, 100%, for sure. First of all, I put the odds in my favor as much as possible, and I started doing that early on. Like for scuba diving, I'm a scuba instructor and a dive master and a rescue diver for 2 different agencies, and I was a research scuba diver for San Diego State. For sailing and yachting, I'm a U.S. certified captain. For kiteboarding, I owned a kiteboarding school, and I was kind of semi-pro for a company for. So I do these sports at like a level of proficiency where if I'm with a group of people, typically there's some distribution in that group of varying skill, and I'll be at the higher end of the group in terms of the technical ability, which can compensate sometimes for physical ability.
So you pretty much pad yourself physically, just make sure that you keep up with that whatever group you're with.
Yeah, I mean, look, the short answer is I don't keep up with the group. Impossible. Kiteboarding, I can only kiteboard now maybe 20-30 minutes at a time. I used to kiteboard 5 hours at a time,
And if we swim, like when we were swimming off the boat, Ryan would swim with fins, and I would swim with like a t-shirt that would
create drag.
and then I had a weight belt around, and I hung line behind me to slow me down, so that would kind of even the field a little bit.
Yeah, and in terms of just overall, I still optimize my physical ability as much as possible, and I do that. I'm very strict on diet. I'm very strict on every day for the last 20 or 30 years. I'd say the minimum I've done, like there's maybe 100 days in the last 10 years specifically that I've skipped. I'm doing about an hour of yoga in the morning. And typically anywhere from 5 minutes to half an hour of meditation on top of that, because I think that while we can't always, build strength as much as an able-bodied person, certainly, we can certainly help remove resistance. So if you improve your technical ability to do a physical task, it'll take less effort to do it. If you improve your flexibility and your efficiency, it takes less effort to do it. So those are things that we can control. If you have the proper fuel so that you're not struggling also against fatigue from nutrition, it takes less effort to do something, or at least you're better able to handle the effort. And on top of that, the training itself, it's a higher emphasis on aerobic capability than it is on strength. So I do a lot of high intensity intervals, and I do them primarily in the water swimming or on like a rowing machine, something that, doesn't have a gravity component to it. Because I can't run hills or, do the things I used to do on a bike or whatever. So Rakesh, does that answer your question?
No, absolutely. You're sharing pretty much your perspective. Do you mind me asking me, do you have the 2 or 1? Which FSH you got?
Which is the one that is like the genetic one that your parents have to have?
Actually, I think 1 and 2 are both genetically. It's just
Oh,
two
Yeah,
in
I
a
think 2
different
is late onset. It sounds like you are 2 because it's yours is late onset, right? I mean, is that
okay. Sorry, I misunderstood that. I thought one of them was the spontaneously appearing one, and the other one. I'm not up on all the genetic. Honestly, like I know that a lot of our community is really into the little nitty gritty details of all the genetics and all. I kind of took a different approach. My approach to the disease is I'm still a human and I still have a lot of stuff that works just like any able-bodied person, and even the stuff that's diseased. Um, Nobody can tell you specifically this is exactly. They can say, well, if you have this deletion in this area and this amount and whatever your chromosome size, then probably you might, but really you're not going to know unless you go out and figure it out for yourself and find out what you can do. So that's sort of the approach I've always taken as well. Let's find out. When I was diagnosed, it was like, don't do any exercise. That's kind of was my story for a long time. So I went out and did it very publicly and did it with a lot of data tracking and the rest. And it turns out that what they thought at that time would be possible wasn't possible has shifted, and I suspect it'll shift again. We're not petri dishes. We're not mice. We're humans and we're all individuals, and there's no way to control for all the factors. So if they say, well, like we tested, 100 people with FSH doing this protocol, and this is, they can't control for everything in those people's lives. They can't control for who's better at improving the skill at doing that activity, who's got the better diet, unless it's a diet study. My point is like you are the experiment. Take like a Tim Ferriss approach to this thing. Figure out what works for you by trying something, sticking to it, don't being stupid about it. I mean, an educated, intelligent approach, but knock things out one at a time. Look at it like any other problem. What do I need to do here? I need to do more work. I need to be able to perform something more. How do I do that? Gain ability, decrease resistance, improve efficiency, and then just start knocking those things off. And I think you'll see, if not an improvement, at a minimum, a decrease in the loss.
yeah, absolutely. And just to kind of the reason I was going trying with you questions was, and this is my desire. I guess we'll find out how well it's going to work. I'm pretty much physically, I like to be physically active, and you know, I try to push, give as much, fight against the muscle loss as we get, and being in my 50s, um, the thought in my mind is, if I keep staying physically active, say more than an average person, hopefully, with my, and everybody goes through muscle dystrophy in their life. I mean, it's just we go faster, right? Um, I will be able to extrapolate. Say I have 80 years of life given to me by God, and an average person has 80%. Who lives till 80, who does, most people, men, or especially men over 50, don't do much of a workout. I'll be able to extrapolate to their fitness level at 80, and it'll be pretty much the same. So that's kind of my mindset I'm going with right now. I guess time will tell whether that's going to be the fact or not. We'll see.
Okay. That's interesting. I'm 52, almost 53. Excuse me, for whatever that's worth. I think the only potential red alarm that pops up in my head hearing you say that, and for all of you who don't know me, I'm a blunt motherfucker, so please don't be offended. I'm doing this out of love, and I do respect people's opinions that are different than mine, and I do consider them. I just share mine because I hope that other people will share theirs bluntly as well, and somewhere in there we'll find, the truth that works for us, right?
No,
But
absolutely. Yeah, hey,
in terms of,
say it out.
the red alert that goes, the alarm bells that go off in that is the having the goal of sort of achieving a level or maintaining a level of ability so that at some point we're the same as somebody else. I just think that's dangerous. That's a slippery slope. And I would encourage you to instead take on an approach more along the lines of being better than you would have been otherwise, or trying to achieve a specific number of days consecutive that you train, or whatever it is, like goals that you can control. You can't control how maybe something happens where suddenly octogenarians are training all the time and super fit, and then you're not there, and then you're bummed, because or maybe your disease progresses to the point where it doesn't matter what you do, you're not going to be the same as the other people. And it's a hard thing to do, and took me a long time to get to the point where, for me, it was more of a physical appearance thing, because I've always been kind of a piece of ass, and like when I stopped being a piece of ass, that was a big thing for me. As much as I don't like to admit that, except the other day, Nicole's 20-something-year-old niece, her friend, said that I was super hot, so that was pretty cool.
God made you
So,
feel good.
the point is like we're all easily trapped by stuff that really ultimately in the end, I don't think is the stuff that will lead us to be kind of content and fulfilled and shit. And the biggest one of those is comparing ourselves to other people, in ways that we don't have any control over.
Ryan, Nicole, hi.
Hi, here we go.
It's so nice to see you guys. I was wondering, throughout like living with FSH, you always have to think about, your pride, and then asking for help, your boundaries with people. And I'm wondering, like, within your relationship, has there ever been conversations about if there does come a point where you need more help, um, would you like hire a caregiver? Or so your relationship with Nicole isn't like more of care, like
I see what you're
when,
saying.
do you know what you mean? Yeah.
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 Yeah, we have no problem with that. We've actually been saving for that for either of us, if either of us need a caregiver one day.
Yeah.
Taking care of her parents has been an eye-opener in that regard.
Yeah.
Not right now. So
No, Nicole does a lot as my disease progresses, or my impacts of the disability progress, whatever. Forgive my language if it doesn't track with whatever anyone else's is. She has taken on more of the physical tasks in the relationship, and I've really not had to do anything else in exchange. But what ended up happening as a result of that was really cool is, well, for us, a lot of the stuff, it's really been kind of rewarding in our unique situation because, for example, as it became more difficult for me to crawl down into this tiny little engine room and contort into a ball and do engine work on the boat, I would start training her how to do these tasks. And in result, Nicole discovered that she can do these things that she never, because of cultural reasons or just never been into, whatever it was, just, so she's become, stop me if I say anything out of way more empowered. Like now she's a kiteboarder and a scuba diver and all these things as a result of initially sort of being able to help me kind of do some of those, in terms of other stuff, ADL stuff, she, there's very often she'll pick something up for me that I can't get to, or help me unzip a wetsuit, or I mean, it's there.
normal stuff.
And if I would say that for us, it's probably, if I felt like her involvement in my life was starting to impact her pursuit of that which matters to her, I would insist on a caregiver. And sometimes, you always have to walk that line where like, look, dude, I don't need to be, let me try to wipe my own ass, you know what I mean? Like a little bit. And that's, everybody navigates that. But does that sort of answer your question? The short answer is yes, we're preparing for that down the line if it was to happen. And the nature of our relationship hasn't really shifted in terms of the dynamic, but it has shifted in terms of the logistics.
Yeah. Gotcha. Cool. Thank
Good-
you.
Great question.
It
You're
sounds like there
welcome.
needs to be open communication,
Yeah.
basically.
That's huge. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Like
mean, that's
sometimes things are like scary to bring up, but you do have to talk about it because if you don't bring it up, that stresses you out. And then of course the stress is just going to affect the FSHD. So whereas if you at least you talk about it, you communicate openly about it, then you can try to find a solution to X problem essentially.
100%. I mean, I think really that just like with exercise, that's true for able-bodied or people with, I mean, it's for every relationship. I would say communication is absolutely key. And um, I would say also, I don't know the way to word this, but it's almost like lifting weights, you know, or not lifting weights, but like let's say doing an aerobic interval can improve your aerobic ability. I think as your relationship goes through stressful periods and you work through those stressful periods, you gain ability. And for us, we didn't do this intentionally, but we decided to sail, halfway around the world or whatever, or a quarter of the way. And in doing that, we it's like lifting weights for a relationship, everything from preparing the boat to, just imagine, like, I'm sure all of you have moved at some point and how stressful that is to get, well, we moved into this tiny little boat, had to get rid of everything, left everybody, took off, that, and then you add other stuff that we've done in our relationship that creates pretty extreme stresses, but also has been some of the most rewarding experiences for us in some ways. And then through that all you communicate, and that improves and the foundation gets stronger. And to your point, I wouldn't just say it's a good thing. I would say that it's the essential thing. And if you don't have open and honest communication and with it trust, because if you don't accept what the other person is saying, if you're trying to look and divine some ulterior motive that they have or whatever, you're doomed. You got to be able just to be able to straight up say what you are feeling, what's on your mind, and the other person has to be willing to hear that and not necessarily get to realize that their emotional reaction is just to a thought that they're having to what you're saying, and it might not even be what you're trying to say. And that takes a while. And for what it's worth, there was a book that really helped me what's the word, I guess, ossify this concept. And it was called The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. It's I think if I'm saying his name right, it's a very accessible book. It's really easy to read, but he kind of takes the essence of a bunch of different spiritual practices as it relates to emotional response to thoughts and things like this, and it presents it in a way that helped me develop and Nicole a much more acute mindfulness of when we were just kind of having a triggered response to some thought we had, and whether it was something that needed that. And that has been a very effective tool in terms of our relationship, in aiding our ability to develop a continually stronger degree of communication and empathy.
I'm curious to know your answer to this. Um, Knowing yourself and knowing how FSH has impacted, you said not mostly, but to a certain extent, how you've physically have seen yourself. Um, how would you go about for people that are younger with FSH if you had to do like online dating and potentially how to like bring that up to someone if you're going on a date with them and you're not using any type of devices, um, and the type of qualities you would look for in a person, would FSH kind of dictate? I wouldn't say that. Your interpretation of how you live with FSH dictate the type of qualities you look for in a person.
Yeah. My answer, and I promise this isn't, I'm not punting. I think that depends tremendously on, for example, are you dating looking for a long-term relationship? Are you dating looking for just to see what's out there? Are you just looking to get laid? That's one example. The other thing would be, what do you find sexy? or interesting in a, you know, so that's, it's a huge thing. But what I would, the only, I guess, encompassing or universal statement I could make on that off the top of my head, and I'm going to give this some thought, would be, I wouldn't try to hide or diminish or be dishonest in any way. And at the same time, I don't think I would emphasize or highlight or draw undue attention to. Like, I don't think that having FSH is by default like a burden that you are going to be imposing on someone that they have to be willing to accept. You know, and while it will create challenges in a relationship potentially, almost certainly, at least they're mostly logistical challenges, I think. I've learned, I keep bringing up sex because I think it's such a very potent indicator of these themes in some regard, because it's a very obviously involves two people who have to find some, you know, attraction to each other at some level, and both have to be interested. And because it's physical and we have a physical disability, it you know, to some degree eliminates the emotional component of it potentially. And I can speak openly. You know, Nicole and I have an open relationship sexually, although we don't often. It was much more when we were younger and kind of, you know, Yahoo. Yeah, now it's more like if the opportunity presents itself or something. But one of the really interesting things that evolved from that, aside from our ability to communicate, this was one of the stressors I was talking about. Obviously, when you're exploring that world, there's a lot to do with boundaries and what's comfortable and desires and all the rest. But you know, it was like, for me, it was kind of like dating in a way, right? Because I was meeting women. I'm hetero. You know, I was meeting women to be physical. You know, that was the sort of the friends of mine and all the rest. But I mean, it was a sexual thing. And do I reveal that I have FSH? Do I not? So I mean, I kind of understand what you're getting at. And what I've learned is, like, women that I was really interested in, not 100%, some of them I'm sure weren't interested in me because of the symptoms of FSH, just like they might not be interested because I shave my head, or not be interested because I'm not, you know, 6'5" linebacker. I mean, whatever, you know what I mean? It was just a thing. But then other ones were no problem. And there's even an anecdote that I share, and I think maybe it's gratuitous, but I don't think so. I think there's something to be said for this. There was a woman who was a good friend, is still a very good friend of ours, who we spent 3 weeks with on a little adventure, and just so happened that we all ended up kind of playing together all the time. And at one point, I mentioned to her, "Gosh, you know, you're this, like," she was younger than us. I'm like, "You're this young, like, beautiful, like, vibrant, really intelligent, like, super sexual, like, enlightened kind of person, you know." And I'm like, "Really, me? You know, like, I don't have it. Like, you could be dating anyone, you know, like, why are you so interested in me?" And she goes, "Well, why not?" And I said, "Well, look, you know, my shoulder blades stick out and all this other stuff." And she goes, "Lie down on your stomach." So I laid down on my stomach. And she goes, "Make your shoulder blade stick out." And I moved my arm around. And then she was intimate with my shoulder blade to completion. And and I thought that was one of the most powerful statements that you know, metaphorically, that somebody could make about this, that it's a body, you know, and there's things that are attractive to some people that aren't attractive to others. And in the end, the stuff that dating ultimately leads to works for most of us. And if it doesn't, it's not because of FSH, you know? And all the rest of it is stuff that we're putting on ourselves for the most part. So I would just say, put it out there, wear it proud, you know, and just, you don't have to highlight it, but don't hide from it either. Sounds good. I did good.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Hey, hi. I have a friend that we met online who Victoria did, who wrote a blog, and we ended up, his name is Russ Cleve. Unfortunately, he passed away. You may have seen or know of him online. Wrote a blog, and we went up to Oregon, where they both were living, together. He and what was, I guess, his wife at the
She's a
time,
widow.
right? Now she's a widow, unfortunately. But Russ, to answer your question, and Lauren, are you on right now? I don't know if Lauren, I can, but Russ explained how he put a listing out there, and he was very honest and open about his condition. And he actually had multiple inquiries from different women online. And was that through Craigslist?
Yeah.
I believe so, of all things,
Ages, long
Craigslist,
time ago.
Portland or something like that. And then it was going to start, and if she's on, I don't want to speak to her. I want her to jump in, speak for herself. But their relationship started out as platonic.
He was looking for a friend.
And he was just looking for a friend. And I guess there was some chemistry, wonderful thing. And then that relationship flourished and they ultimately were married and very happily so. And Russ, God bless him, he struggled with serious, what do you call it, symptoms of FSH. He was wheelchair bound. He needed help out of the bed. He needed help on and off the commode. He was a real challenge. And Lauren really looked through all of that and found the love between the two of them. And she was an absolute saint.
I don't believe he was full wheelchair bound when they met. He fell a lot. There were several times that she'd have to pick him up, but he then had to resort to his wheelchair. But they had an amazing relationship.
Yeah, it really was incredible.
And I don't think it was despite the FSH. I don't know their specific relationship. I just think FSH was just there.
Yeah. And she just accepted it and embraced it. I would even use a better, stronger term.
And he read the letter that he had posted on Craigslist, and it was very open about.
Very open,
his
like to your
condition,
point.
You know, so there was it was right out there, you know, that he was his condition. And she was looking for a friend too. I mean, she was just looking for friendship. And it turned out that they really had a lot of chemistry together and spent quite a few years together.
Yeah,
actually.
Russ had he was quite a character.
There's another anecdote I could share that's another short one. This is probably more along the lines of people who, because I think a lot of times the trepidation we have is related to attraction, and then ultimately to rejection. You know, are we going to be rejected long term or something like this? And this is a very, you know, only one dimension. Again, it's sexual, but you know, there was a woman who actually has FSH who I knew a long time ago, and we were friends, and I was telling her, listen, you know, I'm concerned because in my physical relationship, even with Nicole at the time, there's an element of sexuality that traditionally, let's say, involves sort of a masculine energy and a feminine energy, for lack of a better way, at least for us, where like, you know, there are times when you're having sex where you want to be physically not abusive or anything like that, but, you know, strong, you know, and then the roles switch and there's interplay and all the rest, but there's some people who like to have kind of athletic sex sometimes, and that I was losing the ability to do that, you know. And what would that mean? Like, is this a universal thing for women that they, you know, like, if the only thing I can do is be like soft and lay on my back, not soft in that way, but you know what I mean, like be gentle and lay on my back, will that still be attractive, or do I need to have some masculine energy, and how can and she looked at me right away and she's like, that has nothing to do with muscle. You know, she goes, that's 100% a mental thing. And that was another epiphany for me. So
okay, hey, just to say, Lauren, can you hear us? I hope she jumped on there. I just are coming up. I don't see that she's unmuted yet.
Are you talking to me?
Well, there's more than one Lauren here. I have Lori Moffett Cleve. That's to whom I'm addressing. Pardon me.
Okay,
Here's
not bad.
one. Are you there, Lori? I'm sorry. She's working on her audio. You know, one thing if I could just bring up you've been talking a fair amount about physical intimacy or but one thing I think I've heard as I've gotten older is intimacy is nothing to do with sex. And I'm not saying that you're not making a distinction. But I think you can be very intimate with somebody, right? And intimacy in my mind is emotional connection, being entirely open and honest with your feelings and sharing those moments together that have nothing to do with sex.
100%.
Actually, right. And I'm now 60, and I like Russ. If Lauren gets it, hey, I see you now. You're still muted. I have some heart issues, and I've been taking some medication, and that affects performance on some level. But the wonderful thing about Victoria and I is it hasn't affected our ability to be intimate. Intimate.
On many
not
levels.
sexual necessarily. Right. And that's really wonderful, right?
Yeah.
I agree 100%.
This is a lot of different things.
Right.
Touch.
Right. And
Yeah,
there was a story that I think there was this adage that somebody made an online dating profile, right? And you see, one would expect, oh, well, there's sexy pictures and on this and that and all this other, but this individual's profile had a lot of warts, for lack of a better word. That I have this condition or I have this, and it wasn't that anybody would think is necessarily attractive on a superficial level of a profile. And then he got an interest and he goes, what could you possibly find attractive about me? And she said, honesty.
Yeah.
And that really gets to me, but that's really what I think it's all about.
And there's a really good movie that just came out. It was in the theaters. It was in there for about a week, about a gentleman who had FSH. And he had a relationship with someone that did not have it. And it just left the theaters. I missed it. I wanted to catch it.
Do you remember what the name of that is?
Really good too, from what I could see on.
Yeah, I mean, either way, I couldn't agree with you more. I think that you explained that much better than I could, and I think that my intent with kind of talking about the sex was because it's a topic that a lot of people don't want to talk about, and it's usually a higher percentage of starting relationships than the intimate side is. You have to build intimacy over time. I think the emotional intimacy and the trust and the communication and the shared experience and the rest. And during that phase, while you're developing that aspect of the relationship, which I would call the dating phase, to Kristen's question, that's when I was trying to make the point of that was it. But I think
I understand. And Lori, are you Lauren? Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, great. Because she can really add to what I just jumped on and asked her to join, and she was kind enough to do it. And yeah, would you kindly, because Kristen had asked this question about online dating, and I was, basically saying a little bit about how Russ had put out a profile. And could you share your experience from, that other side?
Oh, sure. Okay.
That would be great.
Okay. Yeah, Russ had put out an ad on a platonic site on the internet, and I was just looking for a friend because I was new to Oregon, and I was just looking for a friend on a platonic site as well. And he said that he used a wheelchair to get around, and he just really liked, would like to have a friend, female preferably, just to kind of hang out with. And so I just answered it and I said, sure, I'll be your friend. And so we started to email back and forth, and we decided to go out and have, some lunch one day. And then there was just a spark there, and we just hit it off, and it became more than platonic after that. And so, yeah, I mean, it can happen. Just because he had muscular dystrophy, he wasn't stopped. His manlyhood was still working.
it actually helps, because the smaller your muscles get, the bigger your penis looks in relative.
That's true.
What Lauren did it attracted you specifically about Russ's profile? Is there any, you can't necessarily say any one thing, but was it pictures? Were you attracted to his physical appearance or how
No,
his
actually,
bio?
there wasn't well, there was one picture. He's, you know, a nice looking man. I mean, we're older. I mean, when I met him, I was in my middle 50s, and he was just a couple years older. I was attracted to his personality. We wrote back and forth. I was just attracted to how writing to him back and forth, he would tell me farm stories about how he grew up on a farm, and I just loved, to read and he was really kind, and, just a really kind person towards me, and decent, and had a lot of integrity. And I really liked that.
And you were doing the driving at the time, right? So you came and picked.
No, actually, he could drive. He used to be able to drive. He had special braces that he wore on his feet that went up his calves, and it was just, shoe braces. They went on, they went on underneath his shoes. Then he would put his shoes on top of those braces. They were specially fit so where he could drive the van, and the van was made for him to where he could drive it. It had a handbrake and a special kind of seat and stuff. And at the time, he could just drive in through the ramp on the van, and then transfer over into the driver's seat, and then transfer back on his own. And so he was able to get around just fine. And actually, the day that we met out for lunch at a restaurant, he just picked the restaurant and told me to meet him there. And so I met him there. And I was nervous. I was like, oh my gosh. He goes, wow, I'm not going to hurt you. I'm in a wheelchair. That kind of thing. So, but it was really sweet, and by the time we had gone out to have the lunch that day to meet in person, we had already been we'd already been emailing for several weeks. So we knew that we really were hitting it off, and we'd also been talking on the phone. So we knew that it was going to be a good thing, and it was. Yeah. And then after lunch, he said, well, I'll take you home, because I had walked there. It wasn't far from where I lived, so I had walked to the restaurant. And he said, well, let me drive you home. And then he asked me politely if he could kiss me. And I was like, oh my gosh. And then he said, and then of course we had chemistry. He wanted to see if we had chemistry. And so of course that was it. It was really sweet. And I miss him so much. And we were together for exactly 9 years. And yeah, it was sweet. It was sweet. It got hard when I became his caregiver, because he sort of went downhill pretty fast after the first, I don't know, 3 years. The first 3 years were okay. I could see the deterioration happening, but he developed a heart failure and went down extremely fast after that. My little dog wants to get up here.
Hi, sweetheart.
So he just, he just declined really fast with the heart failure. And that's really what took him out, I think. Basically, it wasn't the muscular dystrophy as much as it was the heart failure. It was really bad.
And that kind of circles back to Andell's questions about physical training, and someone else had a question about I forget his name, but it was regarding as we age, keeping ourselves into a state where we're less impacted by the FSH that we would be otherwise if we didn't take care of ourselves. And it's not just FSH, like we were talking about how it could be to any condition, you know. And then all of this ties into Kristen's question about dating, that, you know, we had sort of multiple different modalities of interpersonal relationships with some romantic component, whether it was sexual or platonic but intimate, or, you know, starting out and then developing over time as these progress. So that was great. Thank you for sharing that story, and Robert and Victoria for sharing your story. It was really kind of cool.
And I got to tell you, when we first, and full disclosure, I had a partner, and I'm going to describe her as a partner prior to meeting Victoria, and there, as my condition, I started not being able to do stairs and things of that nature. It was clear to me that she was not prepared to really walk the journey with me. It just seemed like the health was going to be a challenge. And then when I met Victoria, I was very open right out about it. I am, you know, I have bipolar too. I do not believe in taboo or anything. I mean, we are who we are. Things we pick and choose we do. These are things that, but other things, like I think you said, they're out of our control. And it doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you uniquely who you are. And I think being true to yourself and be, you know, I'm not even afraid of getting hurt, because if you're honest, I mean, if somebody doesn't identify with you, then they don't identify, and then you move on. But with Victoria, and I think one of the key things that when I was open, that you appreciated that openness, being connected with emotions, very emotional person. I cry at movies. I make no apologies for that, but also having a sense of humor. And I think having that connection, having sense of humor and that magnetism really goes a long way to, right, paving over the potholes of imperfection, I think, that we each and all have in degree, right?
Yeah, I think that you're talking about authenticity. Like you can't fake it, you know? So if you just embrace it and put it out there and accept the other person when they're putting it out there, then that's the best start.
I agree. And I think it's always important to be yourself wherever you are, in whatever social situation. Always be yourself, period. Don't put on a face, don't put on a front. Be yourself wherever you are. Always be with you. Always go, if you go to a party, always bring yourself to the party, right? And then that everything takes care of itself, I think. Hope that's helpful.
Yeah, that was good. Well put. The more questions? Who's running this thing anyways? I just sort
Well,
of
we
started.
see the whole thing. We just see a few people up here. We
Yeah.
don't see the whole. We don't know how to get all the boxes.
I can agree with being honest, because after I was wrongly diagnosed, but I was still, you know, suffering. So real diagnosis, fake diagnosis, I was still suffering. And so I had dated two people, and I think one, definitely the FSH was starting to, you know, affect her, because she already had some anxiety. And so I think that was probably making her even more anxious. The second one, maybe that played a role, but at least, okay, those two didn't work out. I moved on to the next person, and now this current person I'm with is now my fiance. You know, so if you're, and I was honest with her from the get-go, and that didn't bother her. You know, so if you're honest in the beginning, you could even look at it as in your screening tool, because you want someone with you long term that's going to be there with you for better or for worse. You know, whereas if you try to hide from who you are and what is going on with you, then that person may stay with you for the wrong reasons, and that might end up giving you more issues in the long run. So you could even look at it as a screening
100%.
tool for yourself.
I agree. I just, only caveat I would say on top of that, in my opinion, is that doesn't mean you have to like put it first and foremost, you know? Like don't hide it, but you don't have to like by the way, I've got this big problem and I'm horrible. Do you still like me? You know?
Yeah, I didn't tell her that stuff till maybe like, I don't know, a week, 2 weeks later. Yeah, and she was cool with it.
Can I ask? Well, no, it doesn't matter. Never mind. Any other questions or comments? Who's running this? I'm not sure what our time limit is or the format or anything else. I'm just sort of click the button.
I got I got a question, and that is, I think you've hit on it a little bit, Ryan, but with regards to losing strength over time and being a man, I mean, I think of one thing of the characteristic of a man is like physical strength, but then that very thing gets sapped from you and you don't have it, no matter how hard you work at it. I mean, you can try to maintain it and to not decline as quickly, but it's still deteriorating over time. And like, it's a bit of a loss of identity of sorts if you like, identify with a man. And one of the features of it is having physical strength. I don't know if you have any comments about that over time.
Yeah. Oh, it's a big thing for me, for sure. Especially because I come from, a rescue background, where it's a very physical background, and I was a professional athlete. So I mean, it's all of those are strength related activities that are gone because of FSH. To me, I think ultimately, and it's still something I grasp with sometimes, but I am more often than not able to recognize and not just tell myself this, but actually get it, that it's not so much strength, it's capability. And I guess the best example would be you've got some guy with giant gym muscles. He's going to lose to the lean guy who's trained up in jujitsu if it goes head to head. It's not just the strength that matters, it's capability. And ultimately, what is it, the capability, like the strength or the ability that we were that I would argue in my understanding of what I believe is important to me as a man. And that comes down to sort of a little bit of the traditional protect, provide, this kind of stuff role. The provide isn't really an issue for us. So it becomes more of, I want to be able to protect myself from most situations that might be a physical threat to me. And I want to be able to, more importantly, protect my partner and my loved ones. And I want to be able to be the person who, if there is an emergency or situation, that I can respond effectively and just in the general public standpoint. So it became, for me, a process of developing and improving capabilities that would lean on, just like we're talking about before, technical proficiency and the rest, instead of necessarily just physical ability. So for example, from a physical threat standpoint, I can't run away from a threat. So I know that I'm going to have to be, it's going to have to come from my brain or by bringing in outside resources or something like this if I'm threatened in a physical way. So I'm probably a little bit more conscientious of where I am, of the things that are going on around me, and not from a fear perspective, just from a, have my eyes open so I have the maximum amount of time to respond if necessary. And that was a conditioned, trained response that I've developed over years, specifically because of the loss of ability to, used to be I just rock in and, if something goes down, it goes down, and let's just go, let's handle it. And I was kind of proud of my ability to handle it physically. Another thing is I've become more proficient with weapons. And I think that for me, I look at those as another accessible tool. We can't throw a punch. We can't, intimidate somebody who's a potential threat, and we can't run. So we better be able to, that doesn't leave many options, And I'm not talking about necessarily just firearms. In fact, we have a YouTube channel, and our most popular video, we laugh about this. It was a YouTube sailing channel that existed for 3 years. And we had 20,000 subscribers, and our number one most popular video with almost 1 million views is me talking about a less lethal, basically rifle, that you can use for self-defense. And the reason that I became proficient in that was 100% along the lines of what you were talking about with regards to loss of physical ability and manliness. Now, in terms of my own, how I look at myself, it's not just, I do evaluate my ability to defend and protect Nicole and all the rest, but like I look at myself and I go, you know what? I sailed across an ocean. This morning we swam for 30 minutes in 56-degree water. Then I came home and took a cold shower. And then I air dried afterwards on purpose, just to be cold and quaking, fucking freezing for just to suffer for a while, you know? And, you know, I PT every day. I've maintained my medical proficiency and all the, like, I'm proud of those things. And I think that to me, those are things that I identify with as a man. I don't make a list and say, I'm going to be a man, but like, I have no problem. I can look in the mirror and say, you know what? I'm fucking capable in the ways that matter when it comes to those aspects of masculinity that matter to me. And I identify, like you were talking about strength, that's not on the table. So what is on the table? And let's maximize those things. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thanks.
May I add something to that?
Yeah.
Just from some experiences, I think the overall, from my perspective, is how you tackle the physical challenges that may develop over your life. And, you know, if you can't push 100 pounds of steel anymore, you're going to adapt. You know, you have a fighting character. I can just give you a couple experiences in my own life. We were in the Keys and we did like this series of water activities, including parasailing and some other things. And it was challenging for me very physically because my legs are they're not really strong at all. And I felt, you know, you feel very self-conscious about your inability, particularly in public when you're around other people. That's where it's the most challenging, I find. Uh, but younger, then I'm like older and I'm gray and I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm just this infirmed person. But people see me, younger generation people see me in the face of that adversity, you know, trying to live the best life and active that one can. And we've gotten very positive reactions like, yeah, that's strong. Or I think of Aaron Walston, Ralston, who was doing that hiking in alone in Utah, you know, and that boulder shifted and he was stuck for 5 days and he lost his hand. And, you know, you could wither up and say you're not the person you are anymore or were, and throw up the white flag. Or, you know, he had prosthetics made, you know, like close to be doing ice climbing. So he didn't let that disability or that injury stop him from participating or doing extreme sports still. So
Yeah.
it's an area of strength that, you know, it's a strength of character, it's a resolve, it's I'm going to overcome. And I would almost argue that that's even stronger than a physical strength because now you're mentally and emotionally prevailing over some adversity that other people don't have. And I actually think that makes one a stronger, you know, you want to say masculine, whether, you know, a female as well and overcome, but
Yeah.
from the standpoint of that, or we did, we scuba dived in, where was that? In the Great Barrier Reef. And I couldn't swim. I don't have the strength now to propel myself with flippers or and any of that. So I had to hire somebody who like tethered me. But it's like you didn't let the disability or weakness stop you from enjoying life. And I find that that's how I would focus and not so much on physically what you could not or what you may not be able to do that you used to be able to do. You make it up. And I think that's true with people who come back, God forbid, from a war and you know, people are injured, sometimes very seriously, and they don't let it stop them and they compensate in other manner, in other
Yeah. Robert, that's very well put. Thank you. I think to
Yep.
Dan's point specifically, because I think I understand what you're saying, Dan, because I think you and I are aligned on this one, just a little bit, is and this is kind of connecting it to what you just said, Robert, is we don't have the literally physical strength, but we can have the strength of character, we can have the strength of resolve, we can have the strength of perseverance, ability to suffer, and continue going forward, clear-eyed and with focused intent.
Mhm.
I think as far as the protection thing, since we're not able to physically, wrestle, throw punches, that type of stuff, another tool you could have in your arsenal is de-escalation,
100%.
Exactly.
And then when it comes to the physical act of, the intimate physical act, be open to trying something new. If you know, okay, I'm used to doing, position X, position B, and position M, well, let me try a different position that puts less stress on me and let my partner try that other position. And you might actually end up enjoying it more than you realize, and your partner may say same thing. He or she, your partner may end up enjoying that more than you realize.
Can you describe position M?
You cock up one leg here and the no.
Got it. Yeah, we know that one. Okay.
We're a few minutes past time, but Ryan and Nicole, really appreciate again you all joining us tonight.
No, thank you. This was a great discussion. I mean, I feel it was kind of cool because we weren't necessarily the focus of it. That was really great. And really appreciate everybody who contributed and the questions that were asked. This, I would say out of all of my FSH interviews I've done over the years, this one was the most thought-provoking that I've had. So thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
And
Thanks for
Lord,
coming.
thank you for
Thank y'all
Thank
for
you
having me
all.
on. I really, I'm honored to be on and to represent Russell here.
Mm.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Position M.
One leg here, one leg there.
Mhm.
Have a good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good
Bye,
night.
guys.
Bye, guys.